Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're all good. Today I will be covering the 2004 anime series Elfen Lied. Yes, Elfen Lied. Not Elfen Lied, in case you were wondering. Honestly, I had no idea what the title even meant before or while watching the show, but after I finished watching it, I looked it up, and apparently Elfen Lied is German for Song of the Elves. Yeah, so I guess that'll make some sense when I tell you about the premise of the show, but I'm just going to tell you right now that the show itself doesn't tell you that. Weird choice of title in my opinion, but perhaps the manga does a better job of explaining it. However, this is an anime review, so why don't we get into it? Let's put the 2004 anime series Elfen Lied under the knife. In what seems to be modern day Japan, circa around the early 2000s, there are these, well, I'm not exactly sure what the right term would be, to be perfectly honest with you. Creatures? An infection? Evolved humans? I guess you could say all of those could apply, but I digress. These creatures are called Diclonius, and from what it seems, the plural of that is exactly the same word. Yeah, semantics are hard, I guess. Anyway, these Diclonius have special powers, which come in the form of numerous invisible arms they can bring forth from their body to do whatever they please with. And it seems that the exact number of arms are unique to each Diclonius itself. And lastly, each Diclonius also has horns sticking out of their heads, so they're fairly easy to spot. From the outset, we are introduced to a Diclonius who goes by the name of Lucy. Lucy has just escaped from a top-secret facility and washes up on the beach in an unspecified coastal region of Japan. Here is where she meets two college students by the name of Kota and Yuka. The former, apparently being the protagonist of the show. I say apparently because he doesn't get the most screen time, at least from what I perceived, but the show definitely implies that he is the protagonist. When Lucy meets Kota and Yuka, she seems to not have the ability to talk, and repeatedly says only one word in her attempt to communicate. This word is new. And yes, I did mistake this word for meow. It is confusing at first. Anyway, so because of this, Kota and Yuka just call her new, because they don't know what else to call her. Worrying for her well-being, Kota and Yuka bring her back to Kota's new home while he studies, which happens to be a restaurant which has gone out of business and is owned by Yuka's parents. Once they return, Kota and Yuka decide to let New stay with them until they figure out where she came from, or where her family is, or whatever the hell. Now, I mentioned that New, or Lucy, had just escaped from a top-secret facility. To clarify, the show soon tells us that the Diclonius are supposedly a species with the sole purpose of destroying the human race and taking the planet for themselves. And although it may not seem like it, these Diclonius are instinctively compelled to kill humans, and you will learn this in the show itself. This is the reason they are kept locked up in this top-secret facility. So, as you can imagine, the people who run this facility are not happy that Lucy escaped, and they send out one of their more well-behaved Diclonius to straight up kill Lucy. From here, the story really starts to unravel, and we learn more about the nature of the Diclonius and the significance of Kota and Yuka's roles. Okay, any more plot points I reveal would be a bit too much, so I hope that gives you a good idea of what to expect. Oh, so we have a nice intimate scene here between Koda and Yuka. You know, it really seems like they're a great couple and, wait, what? No, no, you're joking. You're joking, right? You're telling me that these two... Yep, they're cousins!
What the fuck?
Sound the alarm, code red!
Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
Okay, that's enough of that. So, yeah. That's a thing. Now, I'm gonna be honest, man. I know it's not the focus of the show, but I'm gonna warn you right now that this show gives off some serious harem vibes. I won't reveal too much, but I'll just say that Yuka and Lucy are not the only girls which play an important role in this show. As far as the actual development is concerned, well, that's a tricky one, because there are a few characters which do have decent development, and one of our main characters I found to genuinely care about by the end of the story, even if they ended up doing some stupid shit that I won't mention. But one of the biggest problems with the character development, at least with some of the most important characters, other than one in particular, is that there really isn't much development at all. By the end of the story, it really felt like some of the most notable characters were exactly the same as they were in the first episode. They didn't change. They didn't develop. And in turn, I didn't really care about them. And unfortunately, the thing that makes this worse is that they clearly tried to develop these characters, but man, did that attempt fall flat. I mean, what was meant to be the climax of the story was completely ruined by one of the worst explanations I've ever seen. I have to be careful here, though, because I've heard some very good things about this series, but I feel that is mainly due to the story told in the manga, which is a different story, to an extent, from this one. And also maybe partially due to the nostalgia factor, because the show was made 15 years ago, approximately. So even though the development sucked in this show for the most part, that may not be the case for the source material. So this soundtrack, for the most part, is nothing to write home about. But in saying that, it's by no means bad. Actually, I would describe this soundtrack as slightly above average. There are a few tracks, along with the opening theme, which give off major opera/gothic vibes, and they work very well in the scenes that they're used. Other than that, the soundtrack does the job, but I would not say it's anything particularly memorable. When it comes to the sound design in anime, the things I listen for are sounds that don't work for their intended use. And guess what? I didn't find any of those sounds. So 2 thumbs up. The only parts of the sound design that really had an impact, though, were the parts that were heavily supported by some extremely visceral visuals. I mean, this show gets bloody, and those scenes stick in your mind for a while. Unlike most of the characters themselves, unfortunately. Okay, so, as mentioned in my last review, I usually only watch the dubs when it comes to anime, and this still applies in this case, but I'll admit I seriously considered watching the sub this time because the English voice acting in the show is, well, not great. It isn't a complete train wreck, but I would be lying if I said the quality of some of the performances didn't contribute to breaking the immersion. The biggest problem with this dub is just the sheer lack of emotion in some of the lines. I mean, there are a fair few moments where something significant occurs, and one of the main characters in particular just acts unbelievably nonchalant. Now, I can't speak for the Japanese version, because I didn't watch it. It's probably better. But, you know, just keep that in mind. So the reason I ended up not giving separate sections for the animation and the plot structure this time is because I don't really have too much to say about either of them. but I might as well cover them both, you know, real quick. Okay, I'm gonna try not to be too harsh here because it was made about 15 years ago, but I'm gonna tell you right now, this animation will not do anything for you. It's not unwatchable by any means, but it's not winning any awards for visuals. And when it comes to the plot structure, I also don't have too much to say because it's fairly basic. Out of the 13 episodes, the first few introduce you to the world, the middle few progress the plot and attempt to build the characters. The last few episodes present the climax, and either the last episode or the last half of the last episode conclude the story. But really, the reason I didn't include a separate plot structure section is because I only really think it's worth talking about if I feel there was a problem with it, or if it's unique. And the structure of Elfen Lied presents neither of these eventualities, in my opinion. Okay, now the part that really matters. What score does Elfen Lied deserve as a whole? You know, I didn't hate this show, and honestly, if it had an ending that wasn't so goddamn conflicting, I actually would have thought it was okay. But more so, there is this plot point which has one of the stupidest explanations I've ever heard. It's just fucking mind-boggling how stupid this one plot point is, because it would have been so fucking simple to actually make it make sense with just a little bit more exposition and effort. It's literally like they decided on what was going to happen and they completely neglected coming up with a believable reason why. And the even more frustrating part is that this anime doesn't tell the whole story, because the manga continues past it, and for all I know, the complete story might actually tie up all these loose plot lines. But unfortunately, this is an anime review, so I can't consider what the full story might portray. From a more positive point of view, here are some things the show actually does well. 1, the soundtrack, as I mentioned earlier, is actually decent, and for the most part, it does the job it sets out to. The gothic tracks it uses for some of the scenes add a very chilling and ominous vibe, which works very well. 2, if you like gruesome, no-holds-barred gore, I recommend this show because almost every episode involves a fair amount of blood and dismemberment. Yeah, cheerful stuff. And to be honest, it's actually done fairly well. Other than, you know, the blood looking like red corn syrup, but I digress. And, well, also, I guess that could be considered a type of warning if you're more on the squeamish side, so, you know, take note. And finally, probably the most compelling part of the show, which gives you a good reason to watch, is just the premise. It's just a really interesting premise, you know, with the dynamic of the humans and the Diclonius. But unfortunately, for the most part, it doesn't use this setup to the benefit of the whole show nearly as much as it could have. At this point, I'd rather stop rambling about this show, so let me sum this up real quick. I get what this show is trying to do. It's trying to spread a message of acceptance for those who are different, and it's also trying to express that forgiveness is important. Both positive messages, but the show fails spectacularly at conveying these in any meaningful way because most of the characters fall flat and the plot is just nonsensibly explained with no clear overarching goal for the main characters. Elfen Lied gets a 5 out of 10. It's meh. It's watchable mainly for the soundtrack, the gore, and initially enthralling premise, but it fails to take these ingredients and turn them into a finished product. Thanks for watching my review of Elfen Lied. If you have the time, please comment below what you think about the video and whether or not I'm making any sense. If you disagree with anything I've said in this video, all good, that's your opinion. Drop a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are looking forward to more videos from me, and share if you know someone who may be interested in this type of content. You can check out my Twitter at DanMan if you want to contact me directly or just drop me a follow to stay up to date with what I'm doing. Anyway, my name is Dan, and this has been another installment of Under the Knife. Thank you again for watching, and I will talk to you all next time.